Hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Advice to Your Younger Self. I'm Jeremiah, young host, industry giants, Epic Exchange. Today, I'm excited to introduce someone making waves in the music industry. Meet Austin Daboh, Vice President of Atlantic Records, here to talk about his experience and to give insight into the music industry. His impact on the scene is undeniable. Thank you for joining me in the studio today, Austin.
Nice to meet you, Jeremiah.
You too. So Austin, from Southeast London to Vice President of Atlantic Records, that must have been quite a journey. Tell us about it, together with what it was that sparked your initial interest in music.
Well, what a first great question. So it definitely has been a journey, a crazy journey. And I think if you look at the majority of things that have happened along the way, you know, it's not just Atlantic I've worked at. I've had the pleasure of working for companies such as Apple, Spotify, the BBC, and then before then, House of Fraser, Sainsbury's, a bunch of retail companies. The one thing that's been consistent throughout that period of time has been just doing the basics well, turning up on time or as close to on time as possible, making sure that I, built really good relationships and networked with people. My career has really just been about doing the basics really well over a long period of time. But yeah, to start off the journey, Southeast London, grew up in Woolwich, and, Woolwich was an all right place to live, so it wasn't the worst area in the world, but it also wasn't the best area, in the world. And a bunch of us didn't quite know what we wanted to do with ourselves when we were teenagers. We knew that we liked sports. We knew that we liked music. We knew that we liked movies and TV, but knowing that there was a music industry or an entertainment industry out there was really far away from our grasps. Like, the internet wasn't around when we were teenagers, or it was, but it was in its infancy. So it wasn't super easy to just go on Google and say, how do I become a musician, or how do I work in the music industry? So we really had to find out a lot of that stuff ourselves. But what basically happened, to cut a really long story into about 2 minutes, is that me and the guys that I grew up with, we were all in school and on the block, and everyone was trying to be a rapper or a singer or a dancer. And I realized pretty quickly that I was a terrible dancer. So I said, okay, you know what? Don't worry about dancing. Let me try and be a singer. And then I realized I was a terrible singer, an even worse singer than I was a dancer. So I said, dancing's not for me. Singing's not for me. And then I then said, all right, you know what? I got to be good at rapping. I'm not good at singing. I'm not good at dancing, but at least I can rap. And after about 2 bars, I realized, I'm not good at rap either. But what I realized I was good at was, whilst my friends were dancing, my friends were singing, my friends were rapping, I had a camcorder, and I was really, really, really confident and good at filming people, directing them where to go, and making up storylines for them to follow. So quite early on, I realized that my skill and my skill set wasn't just in front of the camera. Actually, I had a skill to be behind the camera, and understanding what my skill set has been at any particular point in my career is what has helped me grow, basically. But no matter where you're from, whether you're from, Southeast London, whether you're from a small town, way up north in the countryside, connections, doing the basics well, researching and taking risks are the 4 things that are really going to help anyone in their career.
I think what I take from that is the fact that it's not just about, you can get insight from absolutely anything, and it's not from formal experiences only, from like education and employment, but you can gain such transferable skills from absolutely anything. I feel like that's really important. What does a typical day look like for you as vice president of a record label?
So it's interesting, because when I talk to friends and like family about what I do, I say to them that my day to day actually hasn't changed in almost 20 years. I wake up in the morning, I go to work, and I argue with people about music. That's basically what my day to day is. Although, without joking, basically I wake up in the morning, I go to work, and my day is around trying to support the next generation or the current generation of superstars. That's what it's my job to do. So that can be anything from turning up to a A&R meeting where the really sort of cool and credible and knowledgeable A&Rs are sat around the table playing unsigned artists to each other and deciding what artists they should sign or what artists they should build a relationship with, right the way through to me sitting in with the marketing teams and deciding, okay, the artists that we've signed, we now need to put them out to the public. We need to market them to the public. Through to doing some boring stuff around like admin and sort of number crunching and what's called people management. So when you're trying to help people's development and help them grow, etc. So some really exciting stuff like going to gigs and meeting musicians and doing some really cool things like this interview here, and some really boring stuff such as looking at Google documents and spreadsheets and being bored out of my skull. But they're all as important as each other. You know, the boring stuff, doing the boring stuff well allows you to do the exciting stuff, and doing the exciting stuff well allows you to have time to do the boring stuff.
In terms of the boring stuff and the exciting stuff, how frequently do you work? Do you work from Monday to Friday, or because Atlantic Records is international and you have to work with foreign music artists, how does your music schedule really work? Does it fluctuate or is it rigid?
That's a really good question. It's actually a question I've never been asked before. So I'd have to think about that for a second. But when it comes to our international artists, luckily for us, Atlantic Records is part of, and you have Atlantic Records America. So we have a US label, and then Atlantic Records we have a parent company, and that parent company is called Warner Music. So luckily for us, Warner Music Group have got offices all around the world. So if we have a artist that's in Japan or China or Australia, luckily there's a local version of Atlantic Records, a local version of Warner that can handle that person while they're in that country, or if they live in that country, that's the label that looks after them. In terms of myself though, yeah, I mean, I generally work 24/7 basically. Right. So I'm on call at any time during the day. And, you know, sometimes things in the music industry happen outside of normal working hours. So my contracted hours are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But today, for example, I got into work a little bit later. I got into work at 10 o'clock. So an hour after sort of my contract says, but then I'll be working until about 7:30, 8 o'clock tonight. So the good thing about the modern working society is that most modern companies allow you to be flexible in the way that you work. But yeah, for me, I tend to, the piece of paper says Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But the reality is quite often I'm working for much longer hours than that. But that's because I love it. I love the music, the stuff that I'm working on.
What's been the most exciting moments, the toughest moments, and how did you overcome them?
So, well, you know, as you grow up and as you change careers and you change jobs and you meet new people, you might even become, you know, a parent or a carer over time. What you realize is that you never reach a holy grail of everything being perfect. There's always something that goes wrong. And a really good example of that would be if you look at in the sporting world, a sport like football, for example, where you can be the best player in the world, the best team in the world, but you can still get beat, right? You know, Argentina won the World Cup, but they lost their first game on the way to winning the World Cup. Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the best players of all time, but he still lost games. So the music industry is no different. There are times when there are really difficult days because things go wrong. A real challenging time for me is when an artist is in a situation where there's a lot of public scrutiny on them. So it's never nice to see an artist being trolled, for example. You know, another situation that was tricky to deal with was when I was younger and I didn't have a lot of corporate experience. So what, you know, corporate experience basically means working in an office, working in a corporate company. And I found it quite difficult to disagree with people without being overly passionate. So, you know, when you're discussing who's the greatest footballer of all time or what's the greatest movie of all time, if you're with your friends, you'll be like, no, Shrek's the greatest movie of all time, or Messi's the greatest footballer of all time. And you might end up being quite loud and boisterous, and that's fine. But in a corporate environment, you have to realize that different people respond to different things. So you might have somebody who is absolutely fine with you shouting. You might have somebody else who actually that might trigger them. And the way in which you get a point across to them is by explaining to them in a really calm manner. And then you get some people that are in between, you know. So for me, what was interesting, kind of growing up in the corporate world was that challenge of how do I communicate differently to different people. And then a time when I was excited, I was excited literally this time 2 weeks ago, in the studio with an artist called Tion Wayne, who we partner with, and he played me some music that I just thought was absolutely incredible. And if I think back to the times when I get most excited, it's usually when someone plays me a song for the first time and I hear it for the first time, or that moment when you're standing side of stage and you're watching your artist perform and you're like, this artist has made it. You know, they're the two times I get really excited.
Thank you for that. On the exciting moments, do you go to like music events such as like the Brits or the MOBO Awards, or how frequently would you attend one of those events to like celebrate the artists which you're currently working with?
I'm really, really lucky to have worked with a bunch of artists that have either been nominated for certain awards or have won certain awards. So I've been really lucky that I've gone to, you know, probably maybe sort of 10 Brit Awards and probably about the same amount of MOBOs over the years. I don't go every single year. Some years things come up or I can't make it, or some years I might not have an artist that I'm working with that's nominated for an award. But I've been really, really lucky to be able to be a part of those events and attend those events because, you know, before I got into the music industry, I was a fan watching these events on TV. So being able to attend them has been just like a dream come true.
You're on the guest list for the MOBO Awards now because you haven't always been.
You've done your research very, very well. And again, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before, but I know what you're referring to. So I am on the guest list now. But the MOBO story is a really good example of how you have to take the initiative. So when I was 17 years old, I was either 16 or 17 years old. And of course, I wasn't in the music industry. I was working for a random company, just doing some admin tasks. And, the MOBOs was on. And me and a really good friend of mine, Chris, was like, we really want to attend the MOBOs, but we can't afford the tickets. We don't have any guest list accreditation and we don't know anyone famous. So what we're going to try to do is just turn up and sweet talk our way onto the guest list and onto the red carpet. And we actually did manage to sneak our way onto the red carpet, and I've got the tape somewhere, some amazing footage of all the famous people walking past me at the time. But when we tried to sneak into the venue, the security guards were a little bit too smart for us and they our track. So there's a lesson there. Be cheeky, but don't try anything too cheeky because security guards will stop you on your tracks. And, you know, this was, you know, a long time ago. But what I would say, the lesson in that is we took a risk. We said, we don't have any tickets. We don't know anyone at the MOBOs, but we're going to turn up and see if we can find our way in. So that was the calculated risk that we took. But yeah, you know, make sure anyone young who's listening to this, don't take it too far with that type of stuff.
It's literally, I heard that you interviewed multiple people there at the time, including 50 Cent. So what was 50 Cent saying? What was his feedback to you?
So what did he say? I can't remember what he said because it was so long ago and I'm so old that I've forgotten. But what I do remember is being on the red carpet and having a camera. In fact, my friend was holding the camera and I was holding a microphone attached to it. And then as people were walking past on the red carpet, I was just shouting out things to them. And sometimes they'll come over and respond. Other times they'll just kind of ignore me and walk past. But I think I just said something to him like, you know, Get Rich or Die Trying is a classic. What do you think? What do you think of London? And I think he sort of nodded his head and was like, who's that weird guy? Do you know what I mean? They carried on walking. But I'm going to dig out the footage. I'm going to see if I can get the footage in time for when this comes out and you can maybe play a clip. I'm going to try and do that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Who told you that, by the way? I have no idea how you know that. I actually have no idea how you know that, by the way.
I have no.
That's great. Great research.
On the topic of music artists, who's been your favorite music artist to work with?
It's kind of like different artists for different reasons, because sometimes it's been amazing working with an artist that is just incredibly talented. They're just like a genius. And watching that genius at work, being either in the studio with them or seeing them in interviews like this and just seeing the way they operate, it can just be incredible because you learn so much from them. Other artists are incredible to work with because they're highly organized. You know, one thing about some artists is that they're not always the most organized, and that's why you sometimes need a manager or a team around them to help them get organized. But yeah, sometimes working with artists that are highly organized is incredible. And then, you know, some artists are really fun to work with, man. They like having a good time. So just different artists for different reasons. I would say that the current batch of artists that I work with at the moment, you know, really excite me and really motivate me. Tion Wayne being a really good example of one. Burna Boy, you know, we love kind of working with him when he's in the UK, same as an artist like Jack Harlow. And then in terms of the rest of the UK roster, you've got artists like Mahalia, Koji Radical, Young's Teflon, Taves, Sosa. These are names that not everyone watching this will have heard of right now, but, you know, it's our job at Atlantic Records to help kind of multiply and amplify those names. And I enjoy working with all of those artists.
It's amazing, Ruth. You mentioned how instrumental your peer group was and the early experience those relationships provided you with. What advice would you give to a young person that doesn't necessarily have that kind of network but wants to build one?
I came into the music industry with a network of zero. I didn't know anyone in the music industry whatsoever. So I had to start off from zero. So even though now I do know a few people, back when I was 17, 18, 19, trying to break into the game, I was just like someone watching this now who doesn't have any connections. What I done was two things. I researched. I researched to try and work out who are the players, who are the movers and shakers, who are the radio DJs. You know, nowadays it would be who are the radio DJs and who are the playlist editors. Like, who are the people that are making decisions in the industry? And I basically try to find out as much as possible about where those people hung out. So, you know, what nightclubs did they go to? What kind of youth spaces did they frequent? Where were their buildings? And then me and another friend of mine who, you know, at the time, me and this person were trying to get into the music industry together. We would then go to these events. We would go to these offices. We would go and try and meet these people. And sometimes it was really easy to connect with someone. Sometimes you would just, you know, see someone walk downstairs in their reception of their building and you would say, hey, my name's Austin. I'm trying to get into the game. I'd love to connect with you. And that sometimes worked. And sometimes it never. Sometimes people just thought you were a weirdo and kind of walked past you. So it can be humbling. But the one thing that I did was I never took no for an answer. And I never let the word no deter me. I must have had probably 300 rejections before I finally got a yes. I've still got the application forms in my old email somewhere. You know, I got dozens and dozens and dozens of rejections every single month. And I didn't let that deter me. So for any young person watching this now, the lesson to take out of that is don't take no for an answer. Be persistent, and make sure that when you do finally have the opportunity, you're brave and you're clear about why it is you want to connect with that person.
What I take from that is the fact that the perseverance, and it's that one yes that you need. It's that one gold medal from the Olympics. It's that one Champions League trophy. There's many obstacles that young people face, especially from their peer group. Based on your insights, what are the common obstacles or barriers young musicians often encounter when trying to break into the industry?
In terms of young musicians, it can be quite a foggy landscape now. So when I was young, and if you were an artist that was trying to sort of blow up, it was really simple how to get into the music industry. You would sort of tour your local area, make yourself famous in your local region. Then that would then create excitement and it would spread out into maybe your local town or maybe even as big as your city. And it would grow from there. And then after a while, the noise would reach someone who worked in the music industry. They would send an A&R or a scout down to come and see you perform. And if they liked what they saw, that's how the relationship would start. Whereas now there are so many different ways to be discovered. maybe a little bit like football. You know, back in the day, you had to have some real connections to get signed to a professional football club. Whereas now you don't have to know anyone in football. You can upload a video on TikTok of yourself doing some skills and a scout can find you. So the music industry is kind of similar. There are lots and lots of different ways to get discovered. And that's brilliant because it means the barrier to entry has become lower, but it also means it can be quite complicated or quite confusing working out, should I put my music on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Reddit, Discord, WhatsApp, Snapchat, or Snap, or do I put it on none of them? Do you know what I mean? And try and do it the old school way. So that's the first obstacle, I'd say. The second obstacle is it can be really hard to support yourself financially while you're trying to make it. I know that when I was trying to break into the music industry, I was broke. Like, I didn't have any money whatsoever. And it wasn't until I managed to hold down a stable job that I was able to then finally have stable finances. So it can be quite difficult, especially if you're someone that's coming from a poor background, to support yourself financially whilst also trying to be a musician. They're probably the two biggest obstacles that I would say a musician faces.
Regarding the first obstacle and how the music industry is evolving and the music landscape is changing, where would you see that going in the introduction of AI?
I think AI is really exciting. It allows you to do some amazing things with it. And we're in the first phase of AI. So no doubt the technology will get better. The laws around AI will get better. So what I mean by that is how artists are fairly compensated and how the AI machine learning sort of systems train their models on music that's out there and music that isn't out there, etc. But I do think that, you know, AI is a really, really, really exciting topic. And I think overall it will change the music industry for the better. And actually, we're already using AI in the music industry in some ways.
Thank you. How big of a role has mentorship played in your journey? And do you think it's important for young people at this stage?
I've always been really lucky that I've had mentors that I've been able to look up to and that I've had the time to sort of guide me along my journey. And, you know, I always say that if it wasn't for my first manager at the BBC, a woman called Laura Lucans, then I wouldn't be here today, because she was the definition of a mentor, someone who guided me, someone who gave me advice, someone who gave me feedback, even if I didn't want to hear it sometimes, because it wasn't always good feedback. Sometimes it was feedback that I needed to hear that was constructive criticism. But more importantly, she gave me space to grow, and she gave me responsibility that was way beyond my skill set at the time to allow me to grow. So yeah, having a mentor is massively important. And over the years, even though I've grown into a sort of a mentor myself now that I'm sort of one of the OGs of the industry, it's very, very important that you still talk to people that can guide you and advise you along the way. And if you look at anybody in any walk of life, prime ministers, presidents, head teachers, you know, anyone in a position of power or a position of influence, they will have advisors and people that guide them, which are mentors effectively. So that's important to have along your journey. And from my point of view, I really enjoy mentoring because it's an opportunity to give back and help the next generation of people underneath me grow.
I agree. I feel like mentorship plays a crucial role in many people's journeys, but people would like mentors. People would love to have mentors. How would you recommend they find those mentors for themselves?
I was really lucky. I just stumbled across my mentor because I applied for a job. She gave me the job and then she was my boss. So that's how she became my mentor. I would say, again, probably going back to one of my previous answers, research, Google. But it's worth remembering that anyone who has got enough knowledge, experience and clout to be a mentor, you're probably not the only person asking them to mentor them. So it's really important to remember that, you know, sometimes people might not have the time to mentor you for 1 hour a week. Sometimes it might be one conversation a month and that's all you need. And there are certain people that I look up to that are mentors to me, and I only speak to them once or twice a year, you know. Yeah. So I would say in terms of finding mentors, going on websites like LinkedIn, which is like a business website where professional kind of workers can meet each other. So yeah, websites like LinkedIn, but then also again, Twitter, Instagram, Google. Do your research. You know, with AI now, you can type in a question like, who is the vice president of Atlantic Records and get an answer. So that type of stuff is what I would say.
Thank you for that. That's really good advice. Would you describe your career journey as conventional of those in similar roles? What kind of skills, experience did you not possess that could have made your transition smoother?
I think if you look at the top layer of Atlantic Records, so you look at the co-presidents who run the business, you look at myself, vice president, and the managing director who sort of support the presidents who are running the business alongside the general manager, the GM. If I think about all of their journeys into their positions, they've all been very, very different. Some went to university, some didn't. Some started off their career and their very first job was working for a record label. Others, like myself, we started off, my very first job was scanning tins of beans in Sainsbury's. So everyone has had a different career path. And I think the one thing I love about the music industry is the fact that it's so diverse and it allows people from all walks of life to be given an opportunity to be in positions where they can help, they can support, sign, market, and ultimately help blow up the music that they love, no matter where they're from, you know. And I'm proof of that. I come from, a council estate in South London, and I'm sat here as a VP of a, global organization. So I'm proof that you can do it. And you should never let your starting point define where you end up in life.
Thank you for that. Beyond pursuing a career as a music artist, what alternative career paths or roles within the music industry do you think young people should explore?
So I feel like there's so many jobs in music that allow you to be either really close to the music, slightly close to the music, or not close to the music whatsoever, but still working within the music industry. There's so much you can do. You can be a business affairs lawyer. So these are the people that write up the contracts that the artists use. You can be a sound engineer. So you can be someone who works in a studio like here, the SW6 studios where this recording's taking place. And sound engineers are people that basically make sure that when an artist is singing, and their voice travels through the microphone, a sound engineer is someone who makes sure that the person's set of voice sounds good on whatever production that person is singing or rapping or performing on. You can be a roadie. A roadie is someone who works on live concerts, and they're the people that put the microphones together and the wires and make sure that the screens work, etc. Now, that might not be a job that many people have heard of, but that allows you to tour the world and see some of the most famous artists in history every single day. I was actually on holiday last year and I met a roadie who has toured with, or had toured with, everyone from Michael Jackson to Madonna to AC/DC to some of the biggest bands in the world. I'm not sure how many of those names you've heard of. How many out of those three? You heard of Michael Jackson, right?
100%.
Madonna? Briefly, okay. AC/DC, you definitely haven't. No. Well, anyway, so really famous people from back in the day. And of course, the roadies that exist now, or the roadies that are around now, they get to tour with Drake and Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa and, a bunch of Cardi B and Lizzo and a bunch of other people as well. So, yeah.
You mentioned other roles. Obviously, if you want to become a music artist, you can practice your singing, you can practice this. But for other roles, what steps can young people take to prepare for those opportunities?
Experience is the best teacher. So there is no textbook that you can read on, there probably is textbooks to read on how you can be an A&R. But in my experience, experience is the best teacher. Just go in there and do, is what I would say. I didn't read any textbooks. I didn't sort of go to university to study like a music course or anything like that. I just found myself in the music industry and just, took one step forward, fell down, got up, took another couple of steps forward, fell down, got up, took another couple of steps forward. And then before I knew it, I wouldn't fall down every day. I'd fall down every week. and then every month, and then every year. And, now I'm able to walk, pretty much without falling down, So that's what I would say. It's all about just going in there, getting it in, and just doing. Don't worry about preparing and textbooks and stuff like that.
I think that some of the advice that you've given on these questions is absolutely amazing, and how the perseverance, the resilience, and just tips that people could use to get themselves into certain positions in the music industry. Thank you for all the advice. One last question, the main question. Reflecting on your journey, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Whew. I would say to my younger self, don't change a thing. Carry on doing what you're doing, because the experiences that you're gaining at the moment are going to help you in 10, 15, 20 years time. The only other thing I probably would have said is, Arsenal aren't going to win the Premier League for 20 years. So, join another team, although we're back now. But no, in all seriousness, I would say to myself, don't change a thing. The reason I am here today is due to the decisions that I made when I was younger, and then when I got into my 20s and then into my 30s. And, I'm still in my 30s. I'm not too old yet. But what I would say is that it doesn't matter what happened in the past. What's really important is, what the future holds. And, you as the next generation of, media executives, I would say to you, just make sure you carry on doing exactly what you've done today. Come in. You've got your questions. You've been brilliant asking questions. You've been listening. You've been attentive. And you turned up on time. Like I said, really important soft skill. So listen, well done, man. Big yourself up, and you've got a very bright future ahead of you.
Austin, I'm really grateful for you coming down to the studio today. Thank you very much. Not only has your experience enriched our conversation, but I've learned a lot, and you've been a huge inspiration. I think I could say the same for the rest of the other young listeners. Thank you.
No worries, man.
I appreciate it.
Take care. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Advice to Your Younger Self. Tune in next time to see which industry giant I'll be interviewing next.